Our first speaker is Sam Gosling. He's a professor of psychology at the University of Texas at Austin. Sam's innovative research highlights the connection between personality and environment and examines how people leave traces of their personality in their environments. He's the author of a popular book titled Snoop, What Your Stuff Says About You. And today Sam's going to be presenting a talk titled Putting Personality in Its Place, Exploring the Connections Between People and Space.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, so you all arrived here today and you sat somewhere. Why did you sit where you sat? What is it? What are the factors that really determined? Was it random? Did you choose your seat randomly? Fortunately, you had plenty of options to choose from, so you weren't constrained to where you sat. But how did you decide where to sit? So what I'm going to be talking about today is the connections between people and their places. And I want to have kind of two kind of messages that I want to get across today. One of them is really in terms of this sort of substantive idea of the connections between what people are like and the space around them. And the other is a more general idea about the approach to psychological research and the kind of approach that I would like to encourage. Before getting any further, I want to acknowledge my collaborators on this project. I will often forget to say their names, but be certain in your minds that all of this research is done collaboratively, right through the ideas and the content and everything. So if I forget to mention their names, that's just me. All right, so what a lot of my initial research does is look at the connections between people and spaces. And one of the great things to study in this context is dorm rooms. Dorm rooms are great because on the first day of semester, these places looked identical. You wouldn't have been able to tell them apart. Yet just a few months into it, these spaces are different. And they are different because of the people who live in them. That's how they got to be different. As you can see, that's a pretty horrifying room up there. And the thing is, when I say that's a horrifying room, half of you are thinking about the one on the left and half of you are thinking about the one on the right. So how is it that we connect to our spaces? We do a number of things here. One of the things we do is we leave accidental traces. We try to project our identity. Another thing we might do is to try and regulate our emotions. So here you see offices. These are, you may even know the people who occupy these offices. You see an office of an extrovert and an introvert. So if you look at the one on the left, right, there are photos of people, right? You go along with this people, all the way along the bottom, along the top, people. And you look at the one on the right, that person has a picture of a tree. That's as close as that. Right, and if you think about what these things are doing, these are really allowing these people to regulate their emotions. One is, yeah, exciting people. The other one is down, regulate, just calm down. So I've studied this spaces from a sort of academic perspective for a long time. And after doing this, I was contacted by an architect, Chris Travis. And so he's a practicing architect, and he was interested in the psychology of space. And I think what he does is really interesting. I think he's a visionary because he really gets into the psychology of space. When he is building a space for somebody, he doesn't say, how many bedrooms do you want? What kind of floors do you want? What style do you want it? He says things like, tell me about the times in your life when you felt protected. Tell me about the times in your life when you felt comfortable, when you felt safe, and so on, when you felt loved. And what he does is he then uses that as the central guiding principle for building a space to try and evoke those feelings. And that is, I think, really quite a different approach. And you can see, if you look at his plans, you may not be able to read these details, but if you look at his plans, you can see that it lists the emotions that he's trying to evoke right on the plan. So this is on the building site. People are looking and saying, for example, master sleeping is tranquility, heaven, and Sarah's respite says rejuvenation of spirit. So he's trying to evoke these psychological ambiances in the spaces. Here's another one of his plans. Here the master bedroom says privacy, passion, and reflection. So my graduate student Lindsay Graham and I were really interested in this and trying to understand, well, what are the emotions people try to evoke. So we asked people, okay, do you try to evoke different emotions in different spaces? And after we asked a lot of people about what is the emotion, the ambiance you really want to evoke in your living room, in your bedroom, in your bathroom, etc. And what we found is pretty systematic differences. So we asked them about things like romance. It turns out that lots of people want their bedroom to be romantic. Virtually no one wanted their garage to be romantic. So here, for example, you see family. So here people want to evoke a sense of family in the living room, the kitchen, the dining room, and the game room. But if you look for a different kind of emotion, then they try to evoke that in different. So if you say, where do you want to try and evoke a sense of relaxation, that tends to be in the master bathroom, master bedroom, guest room, and so on. So people are trying to evoke these feelings. Now, the question is, how are they doing it? So Lindsay and I ran a couple of studies saying, well, what are the things you do to make this place romantic? What are the things you do to make it relaxed and so on? What are the physical things you do? Do you light candles? Do you light a fire? Do you have carpeting? What are all the different things you do to those spaces? And we did a lot of this. And you find out that people do quite different things. So if people want to evoke romance, they have a burning fire, they have wood floors, they light fragrant candles, and that is different to the things they do to the space when they're trying to evoke a comfortable place. Now, we did this in some of this research in collaboration with Richard Corsi, who's in the Department of Engineering here at University of Texas, and he studies indoor air quality, and that's the bad stuff you put into air. He's one of those guys, he'll come into your office in a kind of most amiable way and cheerfully point to all these mortal threats that surround you, like your desk, the sunlight's coming in and reacting and putting this. And what it turns out that a lot of these things that we have in our spaces put off nasty chemicals, things that are really quite harmful to us. And there's very little regulation about these things in terms of what goes on in the environment. And so, for example, one of the things people do is Valentine's Day. They want to evoke a sense of romance. They light fragrant candles. Well, fragrant candles are a very dangerous thing to be lighting in your spaces. So the idea is that this sort of psychological profile can be associated with this unique air quality profile that may have quite serious consequences for your health. All right, now, so let's go back to that question I asked you earlier. I said, so where did you sit? Where did you sit? Why did you sit where you sat? If I ask people, in fact, we have asked people, do you tend to sit in the same place? People overwhelmingly say, for example, in lecture halls or in theaters and things like that, they tend to sit in the same place, more or less, over and over again. Some people are going move around, but the rule is most people tend to sit in the same sort of place. And so we've done some research here with Marcus Ukela and Oliver Robinson looking at seating patterns in classrooms. And one of the things you find here is that people's personality relates to where you sit. So, for example, some of these things are obvious. You have people who are high on need for achievement. You have people who are high on conscientiousness sitting at the front. They want to be there. They don't want to miss any of the action. They're right there. Some of them are less obvious. So neuroticism. Where would neurotic people sit? Where would that be? Turns out they tend to sit on the edges of the rows, right? If you think about what is neuroticism, it's sensitivity to what could go wrong. And so they want to be ready to get out of there. And in fact, we saw one of the biggest times we saw this effect was we measured where people sit in our classrooms. The biggest effect was the day after we had a shooter loose on campus. And the day after that was when the really anxious people were ready to get out of there fast. So not only, though, do people position themselves, and this is probably something you're thinking about when you chose where to sit today, not only do people position themselves with respect to physical features of the space, they also do with social features, too. They want to be with people who are kind of like them. They want to be similar people. So we find that people cluster in terms of their values, in terms of religiosity. They tend to sit similar in terms of political orientation. And so this is the idea here that you want to be around kind of like-minded people. And many of you here are visiting Austin. You probably had that same sort of experience. You wander around Austin, you're thinking, well, are these sort of my kind of people, or aren't they my kind of people? You know, one of the contexts in which this is looked at is in terms of cafes, right? Many of you, right? You'll probably go to a cafe here because you don't know it, and you'll open the door and you say, these aren't my people, and you like close the door and go to a different cafe or something like that. And the idea is, and that really affects you. You think, I don't want to be around people like that. So again, is there any evidence that people are able to kind of select these spaces on the basis of those people? So again, with Lindsey Graham, I did a study looking at the profile pictures of people who attend a certain cafe or not. So this, for example, these is using the website Foursquare, where people check in. So these are the profile photos of people who go to a certain cafe a lot. And we showed these to judges and say, what do you think this place is like? Just on the basis of these profile photos. Some of these profile photos, look, it's not even it's a picture of a dog up there and some flowers. It's not even the person. So we asked them to try and judge what the places were like in terms of the vibe of the place. Is it bland, cozy, strange, dingy, douchey, etc.? What kind of activities would you be good at doing there? Go dancing, reading, and what kind of people go there? And what we found is people show very strong agreement. Not only that, we then send a set of judges out to those real places and say, okay, now you're there, what is the place like? And what we found here, if we compare the impressions based just on the profile pictures with the occupations themselves, locations themselves, we find surprisingly strong correlations. Not perfect correlations, but given they're just judging it on the basis of profile pictures, they're not bad. And so this is very much in line with the idea that we kind of sort ourselves into places that are similar with our personality. Many of you may be familiar with Bill Bishop's book, The Big Sort. Matt Mottel and colleagues have been doing very innovative research in exactly the same area, saying people are drawn to other locations where people have the same values. And indeed, in some research I've been doing with Jochen Gebauer, Jason Renfro, and Wiebke Bleidorn, we've been looking at the extent to which your own personality matches the personality of the city in which you live. And when there's a strong match, people tend to have a higher self-esteem, for example. So we certainly have these ideas that people locate them into these broad regions. So we have stereotypes. For example, we have this idea of the neurotic East Coasters like Woody Allen and the laid-back Californians, as epitomized by the dude from The Big Lebowski. And this is a research really that was spearheaded, and the whole idea came from Jason Renfro, because he just realized we have this huge internet samples that we've had, and he realized, well, we know where these people live. Is it true, Jason asked, is it true that you have these uptight East Coasters and there were laid-back Californians? And so we just sort of looked at the average differences on the personality, and the answer is yes, it is true. So the stronger the red, the more neurotic the people. The blue is where it's less neurotic. Those are the laid-back people. These are smoothed heat maps. And of course, once you start analyzing things at this level, you can begin to do some really interesting analyses, because lots of data are available at the geographic level. So, for example, that is the map of neuroticism, and that is the map of cancer-related deaths. If you run a correlation across states, the correlation is very strong. Other traits you can look at, so for example, you might be interested in openness. Where would you expect to find people high on openness? Well, as you probably say, it's down the coasts. Essentially, you have the kind of the concrete, because of more traditional Midwest too. So there are these strong connections between people's location, both within the house, within the town, within the city, and geographically, which relate to how people use space. And what's really interesting is that there's all of these studies done by a lot of very innovative collaborators. And the thing is, you wouldn't have got these ideas from looking in JPSP or looking in SPPS, because that's not where these ideas come from. Think about when you decided to go into psychology, right? You probably were thinking of saying, oh, I have this intuition. Isn't that really interesting? Here's an interesting phenomenon. I wonder why people do that. You blink, And then 10 years later, you are measuring the reaction time of pressing a G key versus an H key. And like, how did I get here? How did I get here from there to here? And the idea, and what I really want is, so these ideas that were, so for example, there wasn't anything on, Jason Renfro has done some very amazing research on the psychology of music. There wasn't any research on that. There wasn't any research on the geography of personality. There wasn't any research on how people use physical space to regulate their emotions. If you look through the emotion regulation literature, there is nothing on that. Yet it's hugely important how people use space. So what I really want to do just here is to encourage you to follow your intuitions. If you think it is interesting, go study it, and don't go studying it just the way other people go study it. There are so many interesting ways there. We have technology. We can use smartphone sensing. We can use the data that's already available to be scraped from the internet, the sorts of things in the presidential symposium, the big data approach. There is so much out of there. Do not use JPSP and SPPS as your guide to what counts as psychology. And I think if we do, there will be, psychology will have a very bright future. So I'm done. I just want to end by thanking my collaborators once more, because they were the driving force behind this.